Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala. īṉṭṛiḍum maṉṉaiyil peridaruḻ purivō, yiduvō, uṉadaru ḻaruṇācalā. Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala.
Namaskaram. That was Sadhvam singing the sixth verse of Arunachala Akṣaramaṇamālai, which is the verse I'm going to be talking about today. This verse is a verse all about aruḻ. Aruḻ means grace. I'll explain in more detail in a little while. This is a word that Bhagavan uses frequently throughout Akṣaramaṇamālai and throughout Arunachala Stuti Panchakam, all the 5 hymns, and also in other works. This is a very, very central word in Bhagavan's teachings. This verse that is all about aruḻ, about grace, is every verse in Akṣaramaṇamālai is important in its own way. This is important because Bhagavan is talking here about grace, which is the central theme of Akṣaramaṇamālai, and indeed the central theme of his whole teachings, if we understand them correctly. Why does Bhagavan attach so much importance to grace? Before I begin to talk about this verse, I will talk a little bit about grace, because this is such an important aspect of Bhagavan's teachings. That is, the essence of Bhagavan's teachings is that the root of all problems is ego, and the solution to all problems is annihilation of ego. But annihilation of ego entails self-surrender. That is, as ego, we must be willing to surrender ourselves, give ourselves up entirely, and face our own destruction. And in order to do so, we need to turn our entire attention back within in order to subside and merge back into the source from which we rose. But the very nature of ego is to go outwards, to be constantly grasping things other than itself. So this path that Bhagavan has taught us, this is going directly against the nature of ego. We are swimming against the current, so to speak. But though we are going against the nature of ego, we are restoring our own real nature, because our own real nature is not to go outwards. Our own real nature is just to be. So in order to just be as we actually are, we need all-consuming love. We must have greater love just to be as we are than we have for any other thing. It is our love for other things that takes our mind outwards. Since the very nature of ego is to go outwards, ego will be, by its own strength, cannot turn within. It's against the nature of ego. So a power greater than us as ego is required. That power is not a power that comes from outside ourselves, because there is nothing outside ourselves. That is, we alone are what actually exists. The difference between inside and outside is seems to be real only when we rise as ego. When we remain as we actually are, we are beyond all such pairs of opposites, such as inside and outside, existence and non-existence, awareness and non-awareness, happiness and unhappiness. We are beyond all dualities, all pairs of opposites. So our real nature is just to be as we actually are. But when we rise as ego, our nature is to go outwards. And our nature is to constantly seek happiness in things other than ourselves. So a power greater than ego is needed to turn us within. That power greater than ego is the power of love. That love, as I say, it is not something that comes from outside ourselves. Love is our own real nature. That is, as we actually are, when we remain as we actually are, we have infinite love for ourselves as we actually are. So the love that we as we actually are have for ourselves as we actually are is what we experience as grace. What we actually are is Aranachala or Bhagavan. That is what Bhagavan is referring to as Aranachala in these songs is nothing but our own real nature, Atma-swarupa. So the love that we as we actually are have for ourselves as we actually are is what we experience as the grace of Aranachala. And the grace of Aranachala is the infinite love that he has for us. But in the view of Aranachala, Aranachala is the one infinite whole. So he never sees us as anything other than himself. So he loves us as himself. So his love is not love for another, but love for himself. So the love that he has for us as himself is what sows the seed of love in our heart, the seed of love to turn back within. So it is only, there's a beautiful line there are many beautiful lines in one of the most important songs in Tiruvāsakam, the collection of songs by Manikavasika. The song that comes first is Shiva Puranam. And in one line of Shiva Puranam, Manikavasika sings, Abunaralale Abantal Vanangi. That means worshipping him by his grace. So even to worship him, even to have love for Bhagavan, even to surrender ourselves to Bhagavan, even to try to turn within, we need love. And that love comes only from him because he is the infinite ocean of love. So whatever love we have, whatever love we see manifest in any form in this world, is just a poor reflection of the infinite love that he has for us as himself. So that love that he has for himself is what we experience as grace. And that grace is all important. As Bhagavan says in the final verse of the song Atma-vichara, the last three sentences are aruļ veiname. That means grace is also necessary. Ambu puname, that literally means be adorned with love. That means have love, because that is the fruit of grace is love, and the fruit of love is grace. That is, whatever love we have comes only is planted in our heart, is a seed planted in our heart by his grace. And the more we have love for his grace, the more his grace, as he says in so many verses, takes us as its own, takes possession of us, takes full charge of us. So, but grace and love are inseparable. His grace isn't necessary, our love is necessary. But our love, the cause of our love is his grace. So, as I say, in these last three clauses of the final verse of Atma-vichara, Bhagavan says, aruļ veiname, grace is also necessary. Ambu puname, be adorned with love. Imbu torname, happiness will appear. So the fruit of the grace that he has for us and the fruit of the resultant love that we have for him is imbu, infinite happiness, because happiness and love are inseparable. As Bhagavan says in the first paragraph of Nana, Priyataku Sukhame Karanamadalam, since happiness alone is the cause of love. That is, we love whatever gives us happiness. Our real nature is infinite happiness. So we have our greatest love is for ourselves. But so long as we rise as ego, we limit ourselves. We take ourselves to be this little person whom we now mistake ourselves to be. And so we have so much love for this person, but that is not true self-love, because this person is not what we are. True self-love, the self-love that Bhagavan taught us, the self-love that Bhagavan is the Bhagavan's grace will arouse in our heart, that is love for our being, love for ourselves as we actually are. And that love can come only by his grace. So whatever spiritual practice we may do, whether we do puja or japa or dhyana or self-investigation, the key to any spiritual practice is love. And that love comes only by his grace. So, as Manikavachka sang, "Avunarulale avuntalvanangi." If at all we have any, we worship in any way, whether by body doing puja, whether by speech doing japa, whether by mind doing meditation, or whether by complete surrender, by turning our attention within, it's all only by his grace. So Bhagavan often used to say, grace is the beginning, the middle, and the end. That is, it's grace, but draws us to this path. It is grace, but guides us and leads us along this path, and it gives us the love to persevere in following this path. And eventually it is grace that will swallow us. So it is all grace. Though Bhagavan said in that last verse of Amma-vichara, aruḻum vename, that means grace is also necessary, or even grace is necessary. That is a typical understatement. Bhagavan often understates things, but actually it means the literal meaning of the word grace is also necessary. The implied meaning is, as we learn from Akṣaramaṇamālai and so many other works of Bhagavan, the implied meaning is grace is all important. Without grace, we are nowhere. Grace is absolutely essential on this path. So generally, people take this path of self-investigation that Bhagavan taught us to be the path of jnana. Yes, it is. This is the true path of jnana, but it's also the true path of bhakti. That is, the highest bhakti is to turn our attention within and thereby surrender ourselves completely. As Bhagavan said in verse 8 of Upadesha Undiyā, rather than Anya Bhava means Bhava, in that context, we can take it as meditation. We can also take it as devotion or a devotional attitude. Anya means what is other. So in this context, Anya Bhava means meditation on God or having love for God as if he's something other than ourselves. Rather than that Anya Bhava, Ananya Bhava, in which he is I, is aṇṇaiyilum uttamam, that is best among all. So this is the Ananya Bhava means meditation on what is not other than ourselves. When we understand that God is that which is shining in our heart as I, but he is nothing other than I, and we are nothing other than him, what do we meditate on? We meditate only on I, on ourselves. So this, what Bhagavan describes there as Ananya Bhava, is this practice of self-investigation. And this is the supreme devotion. As he indicates in the next verse, verse 9 of Upadesha Undiyā, he says, by the strength of such meditation, that implies by the strength of that Ananya Bhava, by the strength of self-attentiveness, being in Sat Bhava, the state of being, that is bhavanatita, that is, it transcends all mental activity. So it's meditation without mental activity. That any meditation is a mental activity, but this is meditation without mental activity, because when we turn our attention within, the nature of ego is to rise, stand, and flourish by facing outwards, and to subside and dissolve back into its source by facing inward. So by turning within, by the intensity of our self-attentiveness, we remain in Sat Bhava. And Bhagavan says that is parabhakti tattva. That is the nature of supreme devotion. So Bhagavan's path is the path of supreme devotion. So that is why this Akṣaramaṇamālai and the other songs of Arunachala Stuti Panchakam are so important. Nobody can understand Bhagavan completely and fully without understanding these 5 hymns. They are so, so important. And the central theme throughout these 5 hymns is the need for grace. So this is a song of grace, a song of love. Grace is the love that Bhagavan has for us as himself, which is what gives us love for him. So this song is all about love, all about grace. So that little preamble is just to introduce what the central topic of this verse, which is grace. What Bhagavan says in this verse is, īṇḍṛiḍum aṉṉaiyil peridaruḻ purivō, iduvō, uṉadaru, Aranachala. That means, Aranachala, you who bestow grace or kindness greater than the mother who gave birth, is this your kindness or your grace? The word he uses there, but I've translated as kindness, is aruḻ, because aruḻ, the principal meaning of aruḻ is grace. But we don't generally in English talk about a mother having grace, showing grace for the child. A mother shows kindness, love, compassion, and so on. So that's why I translated aruḻ as kindness in this context. But it means, that's an inadequate translation, but it's just for the context. In the context I translated in that way. It means a lot more than that. So this verse, the first line of this verse, īṇḍṛiḍum aṉṉaiyil peridaruḻ purivō, is a vocative clause. It's addressing Arunachala. And the main clause is iduvō uṉadaru, which has 2 meanings, as I will explain later. It can mean either, such is your grace, or it can mean, is this your grace? Is this all your grace? I'll explain all that later. So the first clause, the vocative clause, īṇḍṛiḍum aṉṉaiyil peridaruḻ purivō. īṇḍṛiḍum means birth giving, or who gave birth. It's an adjectival participle formed from the verb īn, which means to give birth or bring forth or bring into being or produce. And aṇṇai means mother. So īṇḍṛiḍum aṇṇai means the mother who gave birth. In other words, one's own birth mother, biological mother, or whatever you want to call it. And aṇṇai, as I say, means mother. aṉṇaiyil is a locative case form of aṇṇai. But the locative is here used, as it is often used in Tamil, in a comparative sense. So it means in comparison to the love of a mother, or than the love of a mother. So īṇḍṛiḍum aṇṇaiyil means than the love of a mother. Than one's own mother, than one's birth mother, than the mother who gave birth to one. Peridu is a noun that means what is great, large, abundant, or excellent. But here, as is often the case in Tamil, the noun is used as an adjective. And here it's used as an adjective in a comparative sense because it comes just after the locative case form used in a comparative sense. So, īṇḍṛiḍum aṇṇaiyil peridu means greater than a mother. What is greater than a mother? The next word is this key word aruḻ, which, as I say, this is a word that Bhagavan frequently uses throughout Akṣaramaṇamālai and also all the 5 hymns, and also in other works, such as the last verse of Atma-vichara that I referred to earlier. Aruḻ is both a noun and a verb. in this, Bhagavan uses it in both senses. Sometimes he's using it as a verb, sometimes he's using it as a noun. In this particular case, he uses this word twice in this verse, and both cases it's a noun. Aruḻ is, as a noun, it means more or less the same as the Sanskrit terms karuna. Karuna means compassion, grace, kindness. Kripa is another word that means much the same. Anugraha is also a Sanskrit word but means the same as aruḻ. Anugraha is a particularly interesting word because anu means after and graha means grasping. So what is implied by anugraha is that God comes after us to grab us. If a small child is playing and is in danger, for instance, maybe the child is playing and begins to walk out into the middle of the street, or maybe they walk near a fire or near a cliff edge or something, just as the mother will run after and grasp the child. In the same way, God, when we rise as ego, it becomes God's task. It becomes a task of Bhagavan, of Aranachala, to run after us and grasp us. So that is anugraha. So that Sanskrit word for meaning grace has that is, as I say, there are a number of words in Sanskrit that mean grace, but anugraha has that particular connotation. So aruḻ has the same, it means the same as karuna, kripa, or anugraha. That is, it means kindness, tenderness, solicitude, compassion, benevolence, pity, mercy. Particularly, it means divine grace or divine blessing. The next word is purivō. Puri is a verb that means to do, make, or give. And purivōy is a second person composite noun formed from that. So it means you who do, or you who make, or you who produce. Aruḻ puri means to make grace or do grace, or in English we talk about giving grace or bestowing grace. So we can take it as bestow grace. Bestow kindness, tenderness, compassion, or love. So aruḻ purivō means you who bestow kindness or grace. So the meaning of this first clause is, Bhagavan is addressing Arunachala and says, you who bestow kindness greater than the mother who gave birth. That is, you show more kindness, more love than the mother who gave birth. Why does Bhagavan make this comparison? Obviously, Arunachal's aruḻ, kindness, tenderness, solicitude, compassion, love, or grace, is infinite and free of even the least imperfection, whereas a mother's love is finite and flawed. So obviously, Arunachal's aruḻ is infinitely greater than the love of any mother. But why does Bhagavan make this comparison then, when his grace is so incomparably greater than any worldly love? Why does he make this comparison? The reason is he does so to illustrate the greatness of grace, because though the love of a mother is obviously finite and flawed in so many ways, of all the kinds of love we see in the world, the love of a mother for her own child is generally the most perfect and unconditional. So it's more perfect, relatively speaking, it's more perfect and unconditional than the love we can get from any other person in the world. And Bhagavan doesn't just say whose love is greater than a mother, because the term mother can refer to various kinds of mother, such as a stepmother, an adoptive mother, a foster mother, and so on. So Bhagavan specifies īṉḍṛiḍum aṉṉaiyil, the birth-giving mother, or the mother who gave birth, because there's a special bond between a birth mother and her child. So as a general rule, the love of such a mother for her child is stronger and more unconditional than that of any other kind of mother. To illustrate this, the sense in which Bhagavan makes this comparison of comparing the infinite aruḻ of the infinite grace of Aranachala to the finite love of a mother, Sadhguru used to illustrate this with an analogy. On a dark night, the dim light of the stars is a welcome respite from the pitch darkness that would otherwise envelop us. Sometimes at night, nowadays we very seldom see darkness because most of us live in cities with street lights and so on. But if you go to a remote place, in the darkness, it is complete pitch dark unless there's some light in the sky. If it's, say, if there's no moon in the sky, and if it's a dark, cloudy night, it'll be complete pitch darkness. So the faint light of stars, if the clouds are removed and you see the faint light of stars, that gives at least some illumination, so that the starlight is a welcome respite from the pitch darkness that would otherwise surround us. But if the moon then rises, the darkness of, the light of the stars is swallowed in the brightness of moonlight. That is, stars that can be seen clearly in the sky in the absence of the moon. But when the moon rises, at least in the area of the sky where the moon is there, we see very few stars, maybe just one or two bright stars, but the other stars are completely hidden by the brightness of the moonlight. So the moonlight is so much greater than the starlight. But if the sun then rises, the light of the moon is swallowed by the clear sunlight, which, because the sunlight is so bright, it swallows all other lights in its brightness. So Sadhguru gave that analogy and said, likewise, in the darkness of samsara, the kindness and love of friends and relatives, and even strangers. Sometimes we experience kindness and love from complete strangers. So that is a welcome respite from the selfishness, greed, heartlessness, and cruelty we see all around us in this world. That is, there's no shortage of selfishness or greed or heartlessness or cruelty in this world. But so whatever little love or kindness or even a smile we receive from either from a friend or a relative, or sometimes even from a complete stranger, is a welcome respite. But whatever kindness and love we receive from others, it pales into insignificance compared to the kindness and love that a mother shows towards her own child. However, when we because it's natural for a mother to have so much love for her child. The child doesn't do anything to deserve the love of the mother. It's the mother, by her very nature, she has love for her child, as a general rule. Of course, there are always exceptions in this world, but as a general rule. However, when we are blessed to experience the supreme kindness and love of Arunachala, in comparison to it, even the kindness and love of our own mother, but our own mother showed us when we were a child, is found to be trivial. So in this analogy, the love of others is like the starlight. The love of the mother is like moonlight. The love of Aranachala is like the sunlight. It swallows all other, and everything else pales into insignificance. The stars and the moon all disappear when the sun appears. Or even if the moon can still be faintly see, it is of no significance in the. So, but Arunachalā's love is infinitely greater than the love of a mother. No matter how great a birth mother's love for her child may be, it has its own shortcomings and limitations. For example, though a mother may give so much care and attention to her child while she's awake, sooner or later, she's going to be overcome with tiredness. And when she's overcome with tiredness, she will want nothing more than to sleep. And of course, when she sleeps, she forgets all about her child. Arunachala, on the other hand, is eternally awake in our heart as pure awareness, and therefore he never forgets us. So he is always lovingly taking care of us, whether we remember him or not. He is our divine mother, the source from which we have been born as ego and into which we must eventually merge back. And he is not only our source, but also our substance, meaning that he is what we actually are. So he can never leave us. And hence, unlike the mother of our body, who is separated from us daily in sleep, and who will be separated from us permanently when either her body or our body dies, and who can therefore be a mother to us only temporarily, he can never be separated from us. So he is our real and eternal mother. His love for us is not constrained by any conditions, whereas the love of a birth mother is constrained by so many conditions. For example, some circumstances may sometimes force a mother to abandon her child, whether by giving it for adoption or in any other way. So even though she may continue to love her child, she cannot give it the care and attention that is due to it. Moreover, poverty may also cause a mother to neglect her child, because she may be so busy working to provide food and other necessities for herself and her child, but she's not able to give it the sufficient care and attention. And even if a mother is able to give full care and attention to her child, so long as it is still young, her love for it may later diminish or cease entirely if in later life her child neglects her, or if they turn against each other for any reason. That we see so many examples of children falling out with their parents, parents falling out with the children, and sometimes children may not speak to their mother for years or for the rest of their life, or a mother may not speak to her child. So all these are all natural. The great love that the mother had for the child when the child was small, circumstances may lead to the waning of that love. On the other hand, but whereas in the case of Arunachala, no circumstances can ever force Arunachala to neglect or abandon us. And no matter how much we may deviate from the path of love and righteousness, he will never reject us, and his love for us will never diminish, even to the slightest extent. That is, Bhagavan loves us all equally, even the greatest sinners in this world, even the most evil people. He loves every bit as much as he loves us. Why? Because he doesn't see any of us as other than himself. He doesn't see the sinner as a sinner. He sees the sinner as himself, and he loves the sinner as himself. He doesn't see the saint as a saint. He sees the saint as himself, and he loves the saint as himself. So his love is equal to all. If a mother has several children, she may be more fond of one or some of them than others. For example, some mothers are particularly fond of their sons, and therefore give more care and attention to their sons than they give their daughters. Whereas other mothers may feel more affinity with their daughters and therefore give them more love and attention. And sometimes mothers just prefer one child to another child, now, irrespective of the gender. It is very difficult for us as human beings not to be partial. So even mothers tend to be partial to one child or another. For a mother to have equal love for all her children is it just doesn't happen. Maybe when they're small, she has equal love for all of them, but as they grow up, their different personalities emerge, the mother will naturally feel more affinity with some of them, have more natural affinity and love for some of them than for others. That is just the way of the world. Arunachala, on the other hand, is never guilty of such partiality, because he has unlimited and therefore equal love for all of us, since in his view, none of us are other than himself. The reason why the love of a mother for her child is imperfect is because it is aṇṇa ambu. Ambu is a Tamil word that means love. Aṇṇa is a Sanskrit word that means other. So aṇṇa ambu means love for another. Whereas the love of Aranachala is perfect in every respect, because it is aṇṇaiyil ambu. Aṇṇaiyil means what is not other. So Aranachala love for us is not love for something other than himself. It is love for us as himself. Because he is the one infinite and indivisible whole, other than which nothing exists. So in his clear view, nothing is other than himself, and hence he loves each and every one of us as himself. He does not merely have love for us as himself, and consequently for us as himself, because he is love itself. So there's no such thing as love other than himself. And hence the love of a mother for her child and all other forms of love that we see in this world are just poor reflections of the one infinite love that is himself. In fact, there is no love other than the love of Aranachala. So whatever love we see in this world, as I say, it's just a poor sample of the infinite love that Aranachala, that is Aranachala. Aranachala is love itself. His love for us is therefore his very nature. So as soon as we first rose as ego, his love began working in the form of grace. Grace is the power of love that draws us back to merge eventually in him. So that power of his grace started working from the very moment that we rose as ego. That is, as I explained earlier when talking about the Sanskrit word anugraha. As soon as we rise, he has to come running after us to protect us and to protect us from ourselves. So he's always coming after us and taking hold of us and protecting us from danger, protecting us from guiding us on the right path. We may often ignore his guidance and go in the wrong direction, but he will never abandon us. He's always taking care of us, whether we're aware of it or not. So his grace works primarily from within our heart, gently pulling our mind back within. But because we are so strongly inclined to face outwards, away from him, his grace also works from outside in so many ways to gently push us back within. This is something Bhagavan often used to say. Grace pulls from within and pushes from outside. So in the view of Bhagavan, everything is grace. So one of the ways in which Aranachala pushes us from outside is it is his grace that allots the fruit of our karmas. And it does so in such a way that will be most conducive to our spiritual development. So since everything we experience is the fruit of our past karmas, our entire life is shaped by his grace. He is therefore taking care of every minute detail, both of our internal and external life, with far greater love and solicitude than our finite mind can ever comprehend or adequately appreciate. That reminds me, in Maharshi's Gospel, in one place, someone asks Bhagavan a question and he says, if you are seeking God, rest assured that he is seeking you with a solicitude far greater than you can ever imagine. So he has so much grace, so much love for us. He has more love for us than we have for ourselves, because our love for ourselves is distorted by our ignorance, by our mistaking ourselves to be this person. Our love for ourselves becomes love for this person. That is not true self-love. Whereas Bhagavan has love for us as we actually are. So Bhagavan's love, Bhagavan's solicitude for us is infinitely greater, even than the love that we have for ourselves. When her children grow up, a birth mother will generally desire to have grandchildren. And if she has enjoyed a happily married life, insofar as any life as an embodied being can be happy, she will generally desire a similar life for her children. So most birth mothers are eager to see their children marry and have children. In the case of Bhagavan, however, his divine mother and father, Arunachala, never had any such desire for him. On the contrary, the sole intention of Aranachala was to save Bhagavan from drowning in the deep ocean of the worldly maya of being a mother or father. Not only from that maya, but from the root cause of that maya, namely ego, the false awareness, I am this body. That is, why does Bhagavan, in verse, I'm just about to refer to it, in verse 9 of Aruṇācalā Akṣaramaṇamālai, why does Bhagavan refer to being a mother or father as a great maya? Being a mother or father is a maya because we can be a mother or father only if we identify ourselves with a body. If we identify ourselves with a body, then we feel I am a mother or I am a father. If we don't identify ourselves as a body, how can we feel ourselves to be mother or father? And so long as we identify ourselves as I am this body, whether we happen to be a mother or father or happen to be have no children, we are still caught in that mahamaya of taking, of that mahi maya means worldly maya, of taking ourselves to be a body. So this is what I said just now. Arunachala, the sole intention of Arunachala was to save Bhagavan from drowning in the deep ocean of not only from drowning in the deep ocean of the worldly maya of being a mother and father, but also from the root cause of that maya, namely ego. This is what Bhagavan implies in the final verse of Arunachala Akṣaramaṇamālai, verse 9. What he says in this verse is, Ammayam appanam ayine bhumil ākiyalitu. That means bearing and tending me in the world as mother and father. That is, Bhagavan sees his own mother and father as Arunachala. In the form of his mother and father, Arunachala bore him and tended to him when he was a child. And ammahi maye en ākadal vintidum āndidumun. Before I sank, falling in the deep ocean, namely that worldly maya. Here, that worldly maya refers to the maya of being a mother or father, but it also, by implication, it implies the maya of taking a body to be I. So before I sank, falling in that deep ocean, en mana maṉṇaiyiṛ, entering my mind and drawing, padacchēdam iruttanayal, you fixed at your feet. That means you fixed me at your feet. Padacchēdam can also mean in your state. So you fix me at your feet or you fix me in your state. So entering my mind and drawing me to you. as he says in verse 3 of Akṣaramaṇamālai, aham vuṇḍiyeṭun ahaguhe siriyai amavita dengol Aranachala. Entering my heart, my home, and dragging me out. You kept me a prisoner in the cave of your heart. In the cave of your heart means in your own state, at your feet, as he says here. And then he ends this verse 9 by saying, Chinmaya nam Arunachala. Arunachala who are Chinmayan. Chinmayan means one who is composed of pure awareness. Ninnarul chittiramane. What a wonder of your grace. That is, Arunachal's aim is not to let us fall in this maya, this samsara, but to before we fall in it, he will come and grab us and save us from falling into this maya. So unlike the worldly mother who would like her children to fall into the same maya and have children and have grandchildren and so on, generation after generation, this is the desire of worldly parents. Arunachal's love for us is far greater than the love of a worldly mother. So as our true mother, he doesn't want us to fall in this great maya of taking a body to be I and consequently being a mother or father to children. He wants to save us from this maya of dehatma buddhi, the false identification, I am this body. So to save Bhagavan from this worldly maya and its root cause, namely ego, from his earliest childhood, even before he knew anything else, Arunachala entered and occupied his mind, as he says in this verse, entering my mind. Entering my mind means not only entering it, but occupying it fully. Making him think of him, that making Bhagavan think of Arunachala as something supremely great. This was all the work of Arunachala, as Bhagavan says in verse 1 of Arunachala Ashtakam. What he says in Arunachala Ashtakam, verse 1 is, he begins by saying, Aruvaru giriyena amadarum. That literally means it stands calmly as a hill bereft of awareness. Obviously, Arunachala is not bereft of awareness, as I think Appa Swami sang of Arunachala, Jnana Tiralai Nindra Peruman. This Arunachala hill is standing as a vast pile, a vast heap of jnana, of pure awareness. But when Bhagavan says Arivaru giriyena amadarum, he obviously doesn't mean that it's actually devoid of awareness, but it is seemingly devoid of awareness. So when we see the hill, it seems to be just a hill of insentient rock. It doesn't seem to be a hill of awareness. But he then goes on to say in the next sentence, Amma. Amma is there. Amma can mean mother, but here it's an expression of wonder. Adi sayan idan sayal arivaridākum. Its action is adisayam, it's preeminent or wonderful. Aridu aridu akum, difficult for anyone to understand. So the action he's referring to here, action, Sayal means doing or action. So the action he's referring to here is the action of Arunachal's grace. And then he goes on to describe how that grace worked in his case. Arivaru siru vayadu. Arivaru means without awareness, or without, it implies without knowing any other thing. Siru vayadu means from my very young age, adu mudal. So from my very young age, when I was bereft of knowledge, that is when I didn't know anything else, Arunachalam meha peridu ena arivinilanga. Aranachala shone in my mind or in my awareness as something exceedingly great. So even before I knew anything else, this is Bhagavan saying, even before I knew anything else, Arunachala shone in my mind as something supremely great. So that thought of Arunachala was in Bhagavan's mind even before he knew any other thing, is what he says here. That is something truly remarkable. So he didn't even know but at that time, but Arunachala was a hill. All he knew is Arunachala is the greatest of the great. It's something exceedingly great. Mika peridu. And then he goes on to say in the same sentence, Arihilan Adam porul adu tiruvanamalai ena oru varal arivura petrum. That means even after coming to know from someone that it is Tiruvanamalai, I did not know its porul. Porul is another very significant word Bhagavan often uses. Porul means substance, reality, truth, import, meaning, or significance. All he knew about Arunachala is something great. Even when he came to know that it is actually a place on earth, but actually there's a mountain in Tiruvanamalai called Arunachala, even then he didn't fully understand it. And then he goes on to say, Arivine marul urutu aruļ eka. When it enchanted my mind and drew me near, aruhu urum amayam idu achalam arkandain. At the opportune time of coming near, I saw it to be achalam. Achalam has a double meaning. Achalam means both a hill, but the primary meaning of achalam is achala. Chala means movement. Achala means motionless. So achala has a double meaning. It means both. The primary meaning is motionless. The secondary meaning is a hill, because the hill obviously stands motionless. So the significance of the form of Arunachala is that it is an outward embodiment of that inward stillness that is our own real nature, that inward motionlessness that is our own real nature. So coming back to this, so even before Bhagavan knew anything else, Arunachala was shining in his mind as something supremely great. So for Bhagavan, there's no greater wonder than the grace of Arunachala and the way it works from within our heart to draw our mind inwards and thereby to save us by devouring us entirely. That is why Bhagavan sings so much about grace in all the hymns of Arunachala Stuti Panchakam, particularly in Arunachala Akṣaramaṇamālai. So since he had experienced the aruḻ sale, the working of Arunachal's grace, which had taken complete possession of him, entering and occupying his mind in this way by filling it with the thought of him, and thereby, as he describes in verse 10 of Arunachala Patikam, which I discussed earlier when I was talking about one of the earlier verses, what he says in that verse is that it will, well, I'm now referring to this, that is, I'm now talking about Bhagavan's experience, but as he describes in that verse, so first Arunachala entered his heart in the form of the thought of him, and thereby he stopped the sheste of his mind. That means its outward going activity, its movement, or its mischievous act. Sheste in Tamil implies also mischievousness, but the implied meaning is that the outward going movement or activity of the mind, and pulling that mind inwards to be tanadu abhimukham, facing towards himself. So Arunachala first gives us the thought of him. Thereby he stops the outward going flow of our mind, and he pulls our mind inwards to face himself alone, because he is that which is shining in our heart as I. So turning within to face ourselves, to face our real nature, is facing Aranachala. And thereby he makes us achalam, he makes us motionless, because when we turn within, ego thereby subsides and we remain in our natural state of just being, which is the state of achalatvam, of motionlessness. And he says in that verse, tampo, like himself, motionless like himself. And then he ends by saying that he devours or he takes that soul as bali. Bali means food that is offered in sacrifice. He takes that sweet soul. So he implies that by this process of pulling our mind inwards, he ripens us, makes us mature, so that we become fully ripe, fully pakva, fully ready to be consumed by him. And then he will consume us as a sacrificial offering. So this was Bhagavan. When Bhagavan says this, he's talking from his own experience. This is what actually happened to him. And that's why he ends that verse 9 of Arunachala Patikam by saying, "O tu maṉṇaiyiṛ, O souls, be saved by thinking of this adil Olye if we koli Arunamagiriye. O souls, be saved by thinking of the great Arunachala, the killer of the soul, who shines in the heart." How does he shine in the heart? He shines in the heart as that fundamental awareness I am. So by thinking of him, by turning our attention back within to become tanadu abhimukham, facing him alone, he thereby kills us. So that is the way to be saved. So this was Bhagavan. When Bhagavan says all this, he's talking from his own experience. So because Bhagavan had experienced Arunachal's grace so intimately, he, in this 6th verse of Arunachala Akṣaramaṇamālai, he refers to his grace as iduvō. Iduvō means this. Adu means that. But he doesn't refer to grace, the grace of Aranachala as that, as if it's something far away, as iduvō, because he had such an intimate experience of the grace of Aranachala. In fact, he had become one with the grace of Aranachala, because the grace of Aranachala had swallowed him entirely. So only the grace remained. So he refers to the grace of Aranachala as iduvō. And that's in the final clause, in the main clause of the sentence. Iduvō uṇadaru Aranachala. As I said, this final clause has two meanings. One meaning, which is the meaning that Murugan takes as the main meaning, is iduvō uṇadaru. There, O is an expression of wonder. Such is your grace, it implies. This O is your grace. That's one meaning. But as I say, iduvō has two meanings. It can be interpreted in two ways, because idu means this, but the sound is just a glide. It's for euphonic purposes, because if you say iduvō, it flows more smoothly off the tongue. If you say iduvō. So that's this is according to the Tamil rules of Sandhi. Sandhi is the euphonic conjunction of words and syllables. So so we can so to join idu and o, you have iduvō. O can be taken in two senses. O is both an interrogative suffix. So iduvō means is this. Idu means this. Iduvō implies is this. It's also used. O can also be an interjection, like exactly like O or R in English. And in this case, it expresses wonder. So the meaning immediately suggested by iduvō, when we first hear it, it naturally sounds like a question. So that's the immediate meaning that comes to mind when we hear it. So when it's interpreted in this sense of is this, iduvō uṉadaru means, is this your grace? Is this your aruḻ, your kindness? When it's interpreted in this interrogative sense, therefore, in this verse, Bhagavan is rebuking Aranachala, implying when your love is so much greater than a mother's, that is, we have to read this along with the previous two verses. When your love is so much greater than a mother, if you do not now finish the task you began, eradicating this ego, and thereby taking complete charge of me as your own, and if instead you leave me to languish in this half-baked condition, or worse still, if you reject or abandon me altogether, is this your grace? That's the implication there when he asked the question, iduvō uṇadaru, is this your grace? Does your unequaled and unsurpassed grace amount to no more than this? Of course, Arunachala will never reject or abandon us. Having made us think of him, he will certainly save us. In spite of all our defects and shortcomings. But how quickly and painlessly he does so depends on the extent to which we cooperate with him by surrendering ourselves to him. So the more clearly we are aware of the inadequacy of our love and surrender, the more we will fear the consequences of our failure to surrender ourselves wholeheartedly to him by clinging firmly to self-attentiveness, thereby not rising to obstruct the work of his grace. That is, so long as we allow our attention to go outwards, we are rising his ego and obstructing the work of his grace. When we cling to self-attentiveness, we are thereby subsiding and allowing his grace to do its work unhindered. So that's why Bhagavan said the best way to surrender, the only way to surrender ourselves completely, is to turn our attention within and cling so firmly to self-attentiveness, but we give no room to the rising of any other thought, as he says in the 13th paragraph of Nana. So, any serious spiritual aspirant will be very painfully aware of how inadequate our love is. That is, though we know from Bhagavan the only thing we need to attend to is ourself. All we need to do is to be self-attentive. Nothing else is required. Bhagavan hasn't asked us to do anything except to hold on to self-attentiveness. But we don't even have enough love to do this. Yes, we may try now and then, we try to hold on to self-attentiveness, but most of the day our attention is flowing out. We are thinking 1,001 unnecessary thoughts, not 1,001, 1,000,001 unnecessary thoughts every day, instead of clinging to self-attentiveness. So our love for him is so inadequate. Since he does everything, but he will never force his grace on us. So we have to cooperate. We have to yield ourselves to him. But when our love for him is so inadequate, we fear to lose him. And it is this fear of our own inadequacies that prompts us to implore him not to reject or abandon us, as Bhagavan is imploring in verses 4, 5, and 6. As we saw 4 and 5, we talked about last month, the two meetings last month, and 6, this verse. In all these verses, Bhagavan is imploring Arunachala, either explicitly or by implication in the context, not to abandon him. This attitude of asking God not to abandon us is not because there's any real danger that God will abandon us, but the danger is us not surrendering ourselves to him. So by pleading with him not to abandon us, that's a way of telling him how much we recognize our complete dependence on him. Because we don't have enough love to surrender to him, how can we surrender to him? Only by his grace. Aruṇācalā, aruṇācalā, as Manikavaska said. Only by his grace can we surrender ourselves to him. Can we surrender to his feet? So though in these verses, Bhagavan seems to be chiding Aranachala, as if Aranachala would ever be guilty of forsaking anyone whom he had decided to save by making them think of him, he is taking the liberty of doing so, just as a lover may chide her beloved, begging him never to reject or abandon her, because the love for him that he has aroused in her heart gives her the right to take such liberties with him. That is, in her heart of hearts, she knows that he will never forsake her. But knowing how unworthy she is of his love, in her desperate longing to become worthy of it and to reciprocate it as well as she can, she pleads with him never to forsake her. Rebuking him in this manner is therefore her way of clinging to him and telling him that, in spite of her unworthiness and the inadequacy of her love for him, she nevertheless recognizes how much she needs and depends entirely upon his grace and support. That is, the more we try to follow the path that Bhagavan teaches us, and the more we recognize how inadequate our love is, to how deficient is our love to be self-attentive, the more we depend on his grace. The more we depend on his grace, the more his grace will nurture that love in our heart. So this seemingly it's a double process, but actually it's one process of the process of vichara and saranagati, samapanam, Atma-vichara, Atma-samapanam, self-investigation, self-surrender. Ultimately, these are one and the same, but in practice, they often seem to be two practices that are complementing each other, but actually they're one and the same practice. But the more we recognize the need for his grace, the more we will surrender ourselves to him. The more we surrender ourselves to him, the more he will be able to draw our attention back within. So the self-attentiveness will grow to the extent we are willing to let go of everything else, to the extent to which we're willing to surrender. So this love, this longing for his grace is an essential part of the practice of self-investigation. What is the best way to pray for that grace is to turn our attention back within. But when our attention comes outwards, we again resort to praying in words by pleading with him to give us the love to turn within more and more and more. As I mentioned earlier, Muruganar takes iduvō uṉadaru to be the main meaning. That is, such indeed is your grace. That Muruganar takes that to be the principal meaning of this final clause. And iduvō uṉadaru, is this your grace? As a question, a rebuking. He takes that to be the secondary meaning. However, in this case, I have followed Sadhuam in taking the latter to be the primary meaning and the former to be the secondary meaning. Both meanings are, of course, equally valid, and each is suited to a particular perspective and bhava. Bhava means a devotional attitude. Iduvō uṇadaru, such is your grace, expresses the same bhava of wonder, joy, and gratitude, but Bhagavan expressed in verse 3, in which he said, Aham vuṇadaru ahaguhe sireyai amavita dengol Aranachala. Aranachala, entering my mind or home or heart, forcibly carrying me away or dragging me out or attracting me to yourself, keeping me captive in the cave of your heart, is what a wonder. Is what a wonder of your grace. What a wonder of your grace is not there, but it's implied by what. So this meaning is particularly suitable from the perspective of Bhagavan's experience of the grace of Arunachala. It is also suitable for any of us who feel wonder and joy, as we all do sometimes, thinking about how his grace has been working in our own life, even though we've not yet surrendered ourselves to him entirely, and consequently he's not yet taken complete charge and possession of us. Still, when we think of how he's drawn us to his path and how his grace has been guiding us throughout all our life, we can't but help wonder at his grace. So that is the meaning of that is the barber of this meaning. Iduvō, uṉadaru is such is your grace. So as I say, that's the meaning preferred by Muruganar, the meaning that Muruganar takes as the main meaning. The other meaning is what Sadhu Om takes to be the main meaning. That is iduvō uṉadaru. Is this your grace? That is, asking in a rebuking way. That expresses the same bhava of outwardly chiding but inwardly pleading that Bhagavan expressed in the previous two verses, namely verse 4, in which he sang, Arunachala aṉṉaiyil. Arunachala, for whose sake did you take charge of me? Īṉṭṛiḍu, if you reject or abandon or banish me, akilam baritidam, the whole world will blame or ridicule or revile you. So he rebukes, that's rebuking Aranachala, and likewise in verse 5, iparitapu, escape this blame. That is, the whole world will blame me if you abandon me, so escape this blame by not abandoning me, is the implication. Iparitapu, escape this blame. Pitai, why did you make me think of you? If you only intended to abandon me, why did you make me think of you in the first place? The very fact that you made me think of you implies that you have decided to save me. So don't abandon me now. Yiduvō, now or henceforth, who can leave? Implying who can leave the other? I can't leave you, you can't leave me. You can't leave me because you're my own self, and your nature, your very nature is grace, so you can never abandon me. And I can't, even if I want to run away from you, I can't escape from you. So I can't leave you, you can't leave me. So that is in verses 4 and 5, that prayerful attitude is there. He's a prayerful and rebuking attitude. He's rebuking Arunachala, but obviously with prayerful intent. So as a continuation of both previous two verses, taking the meaning as is iduvō uṉadaru, is this your grace, is appropriate. So Sadhu Om took this to be the main meaning, both because, as a general rule, whenever there is a choice of more than one interpretation of any verse, Sadhu Om always preferred to take any of the more prayerful meanings as the primary one. And more specifically, because in the case of this verse, this prayerful interpretation provides a natural continuity with the prayerful bhava, not only of the previous two verses, but also of the next 6 verses. All these 9 verses from 4 up to 12 are all in a prayerful bhava, if we take this one in a prayerful sense. Of the next 6 verses, the first 2, namely verses 7 and 8, are explicit prayers, and the other 4 are implicit prayers expressed in the form of chiding. So Bhagavan is often chiding Aranachala as a lover may chide her beloved whenever she feels he is not taking sufficient care of her and protecting her from others. Why Bhagavan feels Aranachala is not protecting from others? That is, Bhagavan, of course, is putting himself in our shoes. Who are the others? That is in one of the subsequent verses, one of the verses soon to come. He says in verse 10, Bhagavan says, "Īṇṭṛiḍum, why this sleep? ene pira iruka, when others are dragging me, that is, if thieves enter, or kidnappers enter the bedchamber of a husband and wife and drag away the wife, if a husband is just sleeping there happily, unmindful, is that appropriate? But Arunachala is not such a husband. Arunachala is the ever-awake Lord, shining in our hearts. So how does he tolerate others dragging us away? I mean, Bhagavan asked, Idu unnakaraho, is this beauty for you? That is, does it become you to sleep, to pretend to be sleeping when others are dragging me? So who are those others? He says in the next verse, verse 11, īṉḍṛiḍu, the thieves in the form of the five senses. What he refers to here is the thieves in the five sense thieves. Actually, it means our vishaya vasanas. Because it's not, the senses are jada. The senses are the senses are insentient. It's not the senses is the problem. It's our inclination to go out through the senses to experience the sense objects. But so our vasanas are the others who are dragging us. Bhagavan says, īṉḍṛiḍu ahatilni purivō dahatilni ileo Aranachala. When the thieves, the five sense thieves enter the heart, are you not in the heart? So what are you doing pretending to sleep and allowing these vasanas to drag me here and there? You take hold of me, you sit firmly on my mind, as he says in verse 7, urudiyayirupai. Uneye matri oda dulatinmel urudiyayirupai Aranachala. So that the mind doesn't run outwards, cheating you, sit firmly upon it. So rather than sleeping in our heart, pretending as if he doesn't bother about this, as if he's not aware of what's happening, of course, Aranachala knows everything. So he should sit firmly on our mind. So this is the prayerful spirit in which Bhagavan is singing these verses. He's rebuking Aranachala, but obviously with prayerful intent. So because of the prayerful bhava of these verses, taking this verse also as prayerful is fitting, because the previous two verses and the next 6 verses are all sung in a prayerful bhava, the prayerful and rebuking bhava. But so why is it that Muruganar prefers one meaning, Sadhuvam prefers another meaning? Obviously, both meanings are equally appropriate, but there's a reason why Muruganar often will interpret verses as wondering about Bhagavan, the grace of Arunachala, whereas Sadhuvam will interpret them as prayers. That is, though Muruganar himself has composed many beautiful verses of prayer, in the vast majority of his verses, he is primarily praising Bhagavan, expressing wonder and joy at his grace and the way in which he had saved him from the clutches of ego. So it was natural for Muruganar to take the primary meaning of this and other verses to be any meaning that expressed wonder and joy at the grace of Arunachala. And on the other hand, most of the songs and verses composed by Sadhuvam are heart-melting prayers for the grace of Bhagavan. Though in many of his verses he also expresses his wonder and joy at his grace, primarily most of his verses are prayers. So it was natural for Sadhuvam to take the primary meaning of this and other verses to be any meaning that either directly or indirectly expressed a prayer. So both Muruganar and Sadhuvam both give both meaning, but which meaning they give prominence to, it's according to their own particular bhava. So that's why it's useful. It's very beneficial to read Muruganar's commentary and Sadhuam's commentary, because each they're both essentially saying the same thing, but they're each viewing it from slightly different angles. But they're viewing it from all angles. They bring in all the different meanings, but they highlight certain different aspects of it. So the commentaries of Murugan and Sadhu Om are complementary in this regard. So we, as I say, this verse we can take either as Bhagavan wondering at the grace of Arunachala. Arunachala, you who bestow aruḻ greater than that given by one's own birth mother, such is your grace. That is one meaning. The other, more prayerful meaning is, Arunachala, you who bestow aruḻ that is greater than that given by the mother who gave birth, is this your grace? Is this all your grace? If you abandon me, if you don't take me fully as your own, if you neglect me, if you sleep while these vasanas are dragging me hither and thither, if you don't sit firmly upon my mind, is this your grace? So both meanings are, but the meanings are complementary. We depending on our particular bhava at any moment, we can take either meaning to be the appropriate meaning for us in that particular bhava. So this is the beauty of Akṣaramaṇamālai. Bhagavan has packed so much meaning and so much choice of meaning in these verses. Some verses we can find up to 5 or 6 different types of meaning, and of course within those types of meaning there are variations. So there's so much room for interpretation Bhagavan has given us, but of course the central message of Akṣaramaṇamālai is the same throughout. It's the whole song is a song praying for grace and grace alone, but we can view it from so many different beautiful angles. So this is the beauty of Akṣaramaṇamālai and the depth of love that Bhagavan expresses. Whether we take this to mean, is this your love, or such is your love, both equally, Bhagavan is expressing his love for Arunachala and Arunachala's love for us. Om Namo Bhagavate Śrī Aruṇācala Ramanaya.